welcome to the Quest Forums channel. A few weeks ago, I did a post on different translations of the Bible and how we should use them, and got a few good follow-up comments on that I think are worthy of posts in their own right. And so first, I wanted to do one where somebody said it would be a good idea for me to explain the difference between paraphrases and translations. And it is a good idea. Paraphrases, the thing about them is that they present kind of an author's perspective. Okay? So a translation, all it's attempting to do is take ideas in one language and then present them in another, and to try to do that as directly as possible. A paraphrase, a lot of times, will actually start with a translation, and then it explains it somehow. It tries to render it in a more understandable way. And so one of the most common things is just with idioms. Like you'll see maybe a paraphrase will say something about someone going to the bathroom, and that euphemism. Of course, they didn't have bathrooms in the ancient world, and so they had different euphemisms. And so instead of rendering them directly, they used that phrase in order to do so, just to give people an idea of what's actually being talked about. That's really not that big a deal. But the issue comes in where they go further than that, and where they describe doctrine according to their own position on it, rather than simply relaying what was originally written by whatever prophet or apostle or disciple's work that you're looking at. And so one of the most classic examples of this is Eugene Peterson's The Message, and the way that he puts 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9. And that's a list of sins in the original language, where the Apostle Paul is being very specific. Peterson makes them all general. He makes them broad categories. And the most obvious omission is homosexuality, but there are others like adultery and theft, and he takes all of these things out. And because he does so, he's creating a gray area. The issue with gray areas is that they give people room to justify themselves, which is precisely what the apostle was trying to avoid. And so that is really not good work. It's bad paraphrase. But you really can't avoid that with paraphrase. You're always getting someone's opinion from it rather than directly getting God's word. And so that's a good example of the problem that can exist with paraphrases. But what I will say is that I don't think that means you can never use a paraphrase at all. I just think that a lot of times we get their usage backward. Because people will say that a paraphrase is a good place for somebody to learn how to read the Bible, to get started with the Bible. In fact, the people who write paraphrases are among those who say that. But I think they're wrong. I think that they have it backward. I think that a paraphrase would be a horrible place for someone new to the Bible to start. Because again, they'll be getting an author's perspective rather than actually getting God's word. And so if you're just starting out with the Bible, pick an actual translation. And if you're looking for something easier to read, then you might want to go with something like the New Living Translation or the New International Version. Rather than something a little bit more difficult like the English Standard Version. But you do what you're comfortable reading, just make sure it's an actual translation, not a paraphrase, because you want to avoid being told what to believe about the Bible, but thinking that it is the Bible. Everybody needs teachers, obviously, but you do want to actually be reading the Bible itself. What I'll say, though, is that paraphrases do still serve a purpose for more mature Christians, which again, people might think that that's kind of a backward position, because a lot of mature Christians look at paraphrases as being basically dumbed down, and they don't think that they're good to read. But in my opinion, they actually provide perspective. So you're not going to, I do not recommend reading a paraphrase to learn the truth. But if you already know the truth, if you've already been familiar with the Bible for years, then going into a paraphrase can help you see things from a different angle. And again, that's just receiving teaching. That's like listening to me or hearing a sermon on a Sunday morning. None of those things is inspired. You're just getting somebody's perspective. But getting somebody's perspective can help you see things in a better way that adds to your understanding and adds to your growth as a believer. And so that's what I would say, is that if you're new to the faith, avoid paraphrases. But if you're a mature Christian who knows the Bible, go ahead and use them to get a fresh look at things. It's a good idea from time to time. And so hopefully that does kind of give that description of the difference between a paraphrase and a translation. If you have anything that you'd like to share, or if you want to ask another question, you can leave those in the comments below. Thanks very much for checking out this video, and until next time, keep looking up.